Now, another feature in Photoshop you'll find yourself using all too often is the brush tool. There's always going to be a scenario where you find yourself using the brush tool for whatever, whether it's doing something for an effect or a correction or something like that. I just want to talk about the basic function of the brush tool in this lesson, and then in the next video we're going to get into the brush options, which is one big panel where you can manage the total behavior of the brush in a number of different really creative ways. So let's just say I'm going to use a brush tool for basic painting. Well, you go into toolbar and actually go ahead and select the brush tool, standard brush tool right here. And you go up in the options bar. And the first menu here is where this little icon is where you locate the brush tip. And the type of brush tip you're going to use, you just click on it and you'll have this menu down here and it shows you all these different icons for the different types of brushes that are available. Now if you click on this little tiny wheel over on the right side here, you'll notice that there are at the bottom here a list of different groups of preset brushes. These are built into Photoshop, so you should have these in your program. All you simply do is just grab or select whatever brushes you want to load. For instance, I'm going to do natural brushes too, and it's going to ask you if you want to append them, meaning add them to the existing list of brushes, or go ahead and replace the brushes altogether by clicking OK. I'm not going to do either one of those, but I just wanted to show you how you can add a set of brushes that are built in there. And it isn't just brushes that are built into Photoshop, but you can also load a set of brushes that you may have downloaded from the internet by going in here and choosing load brushes, and you can access the set that way as well. Now when you're editing a brush, and I've got a soft edge brush here selected. I'm just going to select this very first one in the icon here, and just above it you have the size slider, and you actually move this left to right to determine the size of your brush. And you have the hardness slider as well. This determines how hard or how soft the brush is, 0 being the softest and 100 being the hardest. And to show you the difference there, if I take it to 0, you can see it's a very soft edge brush as I paint, and it's going to paint whatever your foreground color is set to. Right now it's set to black down here, as you can see on the bottom. But if I click on that color swatch, and let's change it to something a little bit brighter, so you can see it's painting a nice soft edge green there. And if I go in there and bring that hardness to 100, you'll see now it's giving me a hard edged green brush there. So I can adjust that just by moving that slider back and forth. Now moving further down, I have blend modes. I can actually, you heard me talk about blend modes in an earlier video, that apply to layers. They also apply to brushes as well. If I were to change the blend mode to say overlay, you can see that that same green is going to blend in with the image I'm painting on through the use of that blend mode. Now I can also determine the opacity of my brush, whether I want it to be full or just paint very lightly. I can determine that by choosing the amount of opacity I want it to have, as well as the flow setting, which determines how much of the pixels are going to be flowing when you click and start painting. So those are the basic features of the brushes. And again, you just simply create or select a brush in the brush panel here. Just move your slider down and just grab whatever brush you're going to use, and you can change the size and hardness. And then just go in your image and go ahead and start painting. Now there are keyboard shortcuts to allow you to resize and adjust your brush as well. Now just to show you a couple of these, I'm going to hold down Control, Option, Command, and then click with the brush, and it's going to show you the color picker appears right on my screen. This is a heads-up display of my color picker, and if I just move my cursor over here and choose a color, and then I can actually adjust its brightness by moving it around into the square area here. So the vertical bar here chooses the overall color, and then I can determine its lightness or darkness in the square over here, and then I can continue to paint. I can also adjust the size and hardness with a keyboard shortcut. Hold down Shift, Control, Option, and then click and drag. Dragging left or right will actually increase or decrease the size of the brush, and if you drag up or down, will change the softness of the brush, or the hardness rather, and you can see that in this little heads-up display changing that percentage right there. So again, up and down changes the softness of the brush, or the hardness rather, and then left or right changes the size of the brush. So when you're working on a project and you want to access those settings quickly and easily, you can do that through those keyboard shortcuts. But being able to select a brush, going in here, manipulating it through the options in the options bar can get you painting really quickly and easily. Now once you have an understanding of the brush basics here in Photoshop, you can take it a step further by adding behaviors to your brush through the brush options. Now I'm going to go in here in my toolbar. I've got my toolbar or my brush tool already selected, and I'm going to go over here in this icon. Now up in the options bar next to the brush menu right here where we select the brush, change the size and the hardness, you remember that. But right next to that is this little icon with these brushes on it. When I click on that, it's going to open up my brush options panel. Now this is also accessible from the window menu right here. If you just go over here and choose brush, it'll open up this panel as well. This is where you can really take brushes a dramatic step further. Now up here, you have the brush tip shape, and these basically are the same features you have up in the menu up here, where you have the size, hardness, and you can choose from the brush menu. That same brush menu appears in this window right here, and down just below it you can adjust the size. You can even flip the brush on the X and Y axis, change the angle, roundness. All these just are some extended features with adjusting the basic brush tip shape. Now you can take it further by checking on these items just below, things like shape dynamics, which allow you to modify the size jitter. Now you'll see the word jitter throughout this panel, and basically it means it's going to randomize that feature as you paint. So in this case, I'm going to randomize the size by determining how much of it I want to randomize. And you can go all the way from 0 to 100%. You can also have this feature controlled. Anytime you see a control menu right here in the brush panel, you can determine it if you wanted to have it fade or use pen pressure if you're using a pressure-sensitive tablet like a Wacom Intuos or something like that, or a Cintiq perhaps. Those are also available as well and give you a greater degree of control over the brushes. So again, you have size jitter, you have things like angle jitter. In fact, let's choose a different brush so you can see some of these changes taking place here. I've just got a hair brush here that I've got. So you can see if I move these sliders left and right, there's a preview panel here at the very bottom of the panel that shows you the behavior of that brush, what it's going to look like. And if I just do the size jitter, you see it randomizes the size. I can do the angle jitter and it changes the angle. And this is how much it's going to change as I paint. In fact, if I go over into my image and start painting, you can see what it's doing as I paint. It's giving me that same randomization that you see here in the preview image. And again, I can adjust the roundness jitter, and I can determine how little or how much it's going to apply that setting. All different types of features. I can scatter the brush a little bit more. I have scatter features where you can go over here and just determine how much of it you want to scatter, and even the amount of it scattering you want it to do. If I wanted to get a little bit more clustered effect going on there, it looks really, really good, and there's a lot of control you can have there. I can apply a texture to the brush, going in here and then choosing a texture from this menu, and then modifying the behavior of that texture on that brush by scaling it, changing its brightness, its contrast, and I can even apply a blend mode, so it actually will blend with that existing brush in a much different way. So I have dual brushes. I can actually have two different brushes going on, one from the main brush menu, and then select one in this menu as well, and have them interact with each other through the use of blend modes, as well as changing the size, spacing, and scattering, and thus giving me a more interesting effect. I can even add color dynamics to my brush. I can have it altering back and forth between the foreground and background colors just by moving this slider. I can determine how much of that effect is going to be applied. I can have it change the color as it paints by using the hue jitter setting here. Saturation jitter, brightness jitter, all these jitter settings, as I mentioned, basically randomize whatever property it is attached to. So you can randomize the saturation, randomize the brightness of the brush, all that available here in the brush options. Even the transfer settings basically applies to opacity. I can randomize the opacity of the brush. Notice what's happening with the brush here in the preview panel just below, and it gives you a good idea of what it's going to look like as these effects are applied. Again, you have those control menus where you can apply pen pressure and such like that. If you are using a pressure-sensitive tablet, those are completely available. Brush pose is a relatively new feature. It allows you to determine the tilt, if you're using certain tools. And noise, wet edges, these are elements that don't have settings, but just effects you can apply to the brush. You can add a little bit of noise to it. Wet edges tends to give you a more natural look if you're going for that kind of wet watercolor look. That's a good effect for that. Build up allows you to just build up colors on top of themselves, very much in a natural way that you would build colors up with real brushes or real colors. Smoothing just makes things a little bit smoother. It actually gives you a little bit more of an edge, almost calling it a steady hand, really. If you're really doing precise work, this will help you get a little bit more precise elements going on there. And you can protect texture on your images as well by simply checking on these items. But a long list of options available to you that take brushes that much further. Like layer styles in Photoshop, I am still experimenting with this panel and coming up with all kinds of variations and creating different types of brushes and mixes and things like that, and just all different ways to be able to take brushes to the next level by not just being able to go up here in the options bar and apply basic properties, but take them that extra step further by going in here and playing around with these different settings here. And I'll tell you this, I'll give you a good piece of advice. There's no real formula for what makes a great brush. All the brushes I've created and really had great success with have all come from experimenting, just by going in here and checking on these items, moving these sliders back and forth, and really just experimenting with them, playing around, and you will be surprised at what you can discover.